How well do you go with the flow? So while the root chakra allows us to ground down and provides us with a sense of stability and security, the sacral chakra allows us to have a sense of flow. And what can't bend will often break. And like a tree that grounds down so that it can rise up and sway, our sacral chakra helps us find movement even while we're grounded. So, merry meet, everyone. I'm Aislin. This is Ask Aislin. I'm here tonight talking all about the sacral chakra. So, for those who are joining me live, welcome. It's great to see you here. If you are watching this live or in replay and you like what you hear, leave a heart or a thumbs up. It just helps us get this out into the feed of more people. If you're watching this later on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel Body Mind Witchcraft so you won't miss any future episodes. And if you are here live, leave questions and comments in the chat, and I will be answering all the questions at the end of the Q&A, and I'll just be watching the chat as we go. Hi, Melinda and Jen. I see a few people joining us in the chat. So welcome, everybody. So we're here talking about the sacral chakra. So I'm going to start by just giving some basics about the sacral chakra. We'll look at how to know whether our own sacral chakra is balanced or whether it needs some work. We're going to learn about correspondences in case we want to set up some rituals regarding the sacral chakra, some alignment practices, attunement practices we can use to get that chakra back into balance as well. And then at the end, we'll also be talking about the importance of shadow work in our sacral chakra. All right, so let's just dive in. And again, if you're live, leave any questions or comments here in the chat. And let's talk about the location of the sacral chakra first. So the sacral chakra is our second chakra. It is located in between the navel and the pelvis. So usually if you go to your navel on your own body and then count down about 2 or 3 inches, that's about the location of the sacral chakra. So sometimes people can actually feel it if you get into a meditative state, and especially when you're lying down, but even when you're seated and you place your hand in that area. You might think of it as the womb area, no matter what gender we are. It doesn't matter, just right down here. And you can sometimes feel that energy pulsing in underneath your hand. Now, some can feel it, others can't. If you can't feel it, that is okay. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong. Just some people are more sensitive through the palm than others. Now, the name for the sacral chakra is Svadhisthana. Svadhisthana translates from Sanskrit into a few different phrases, depending on the translation. Sometimes they say it translates to one's own place or one's own abode. Sometimes it's translated to the word sweetness. And both of these translations really speak volumes to what the sacral chakra is all about. It is a place where we can find ourselves, find what we need, our desires, and really tap into that energy. And it's also a very, very sweet place that is attached to our pleasures. And when we are not able to find pleasures in life, when we're not able to find joy and find happiness, we will often find that, like a creek that was flowing, that area will get dried up. And that leads us into the element that's tied to the sacral chakra, which is water. So whereas the first chakra, the root chakra, is tied to the to the earth element, and it really helps us root down, ground down, and get that sense of stability and security. Here in the sacral chakra, this is all about the element of water. So it's about how can we flow. And if you think about it, we need water to water the earth, right? To grow the sweet fruit that is our pleasure, that is our joy of being incarnated here on earth. So here in the sacral chakra, we find our sense of flowing, our sense of fluidity. If you're somebody who has trouble going with the flow, then you probably have some issues here in the sacral chakra. And we'll be looking at all that as we go through. This area is also connected to our emotions. And so if we're having trouble feeling our emotions, or we're feeling too many emotions, oftentimes that also indicates that there's some kind of an imbalance in this area. The sacral chakra is connected to our creativity. So if you are someone who is naturally creative, perhaps you're an artist or a musician or a writer, a crafter of any kind, and you go through periods of time where you feel that you're creatively blocked, that would be an indication that the sacral chakra is an area to look at that time. And this is also the area that's connected to our sensuality and our sexuality. So if we're having any issues with connecting, with intimacy, or feeling guilt about sex, that will also be tied to this area. Now, the sacral chakra, like all of the chakras, it vibrates with a specific color, and the color of the sacral chakra is orange. So one way that we can bring more of the sacral chakra or help balance the sacral chakra is to bring more of the color orange into our lives. Now, a lot of us have blockages here and some stuck and stagnant energy. And while the sacral chakra is, when it is optimally flowing, when the energy is optimally flowing through it, we're going to find that we move more fluidly through our lives. We're going to find that pleasure isn't hard to come by. We're going to find that we're just naturally creative, whatever that means to us. The challenge here, though, when this energy starts to get blocked or stuck or stagnant, can be caused by a variety of things. But oftentimes there is a challenge of guilt. So we may feel guilty about feeling good. We may feel guilty about letting go, or guilty about putting ourselves first. I know there's a lot of overgivers in our group. Guilty about experiencing pleasure. And all of this can lead to those imbalances in the sacral chakra. So for those of us who are overgivers, and I know that there are a lot of us here in both the Body Mind Witchcraft group and our Shadow Seekers membership, it can make us feel guilty when we're not giving enough. And the reality is that we can only give so much before we have to give back to ourselves, or we're going to find something detrimental happens, either to us physically or emotionally or spiritually. We fully need to accept that we require pleasure as well. That's really the key to working with the sacral chakra. And so many people deny and suppress their primary pleasures. Now, some of this may be a product of our Christian upbringing. So even if you were not brought up Christian, most of my viewers are in the United States. So it is a collective. There's a Christian identity within the collective. And so many of us have been exposed to these ideas that putting yourself first is wrong, that experiencing pleasure is bad. Perhaps you went to Sunday school and they taught you that sex was wrong. So there, even if we get it to become adults and we are able to logically release some of those ideas, the unfortunate part is they take anchor into the collective unconscious, just simply of the species or the culture we're living in. And it's just around us all the time. So it's hard for us to not be unconsciously affected by that. So what that means is that we may have to go out of our way to nurture our desires and our pleasures and make sure that they are being met and taken care of. Flow is also a very important aspect here of this chakra. When our energy is all dammed up in the physical body, think about a dam dam for water, right? If you've ever been to a dam before, or you've seen beavers build a dam, so it builds up water on one side, and another area, it's diverting the flow away from that area. So the same thing is happening to us when that energy kind of gets dammed up or stuck or stagnant in this area. It can't move. And the physical body can become rigid and disconnected. And so that's one sign that you have some sacral chakra issues, is you feel that your body is very rigid and it doesn't move as well as you feel it could. Now we're going to talk about more of the sacral chakra practices, things to get us more in attunement in a bit, that will help us with this as well. Now, like the root, a lot of the issues of the sacral chakra, they start very early in childhood. Those of us who were overly criticized by parents are going to find that we probably have issues here. Those of us who were overly controlled, especially if we were controlled by caregivers and we never really understood why we could or couldn't do certain things, that's going to create issues in the sacral chakra. Anyone who's experienced sexual abuse or rape, that's gonna leave scars within the sacral chakra, and it doesn't mean that we can't heal that area. We absolutely can, but it does mean that we probably have some work to do here. Anyone who has had surgeries of the reproductive area or have issues with the menstrual cycle, Anybody who has any hormonal difficulties, these would all be areas connected to the sacral chakra as well. So working with our sacral chakra is going to be important for any of us who experience any of those things. Now, besides some of these issues, how would we know if the sacral chakra was in balance or out of balance? So one thing that we can do is we can observe what's going on in our bodies, physical bodies. We can observe what's going on in our emotions, and that's going to be a big key to what's going on in our energetic bodies. It's really a way that we can diagnose energetically what is the kinds of issues that we have. Now, it is important to note that chakras are not fully blocked. We never fully have energetic centers fully blocked. We might have blockages in them, which just simply means there's areas where the energy isn't flowing properly. And we might have excess of energy flowing through the chakras. So that means you might hear people say they're too open. So that would be there's too much energy flowing. Or the chakra might be constricted or restricted, and that just means the energy isn't flowing at the level that we'd like it to flow. So it's good to just make sure that we know these are not fully blocked. You just may have blockages. Okay, so if we have restricted energy through the sacral chakra, this is what it's going to look like. So you may have restricted energy in your own physical movement, your own ability to move physically. So what that can look like is rigid muscles, stiff joints. If you are somebody who's got a lot of tension in the body, like if you've been to a masseuse or someone has told you your body's really tense, you probably want to work with your sacral chakra. And in fact, massage, self-massage and massage by someone else is a very good way to work with the sacral chakra. If you feel that you walk stiffly, if your movements are kind of stiff, that would also be an indication that the sacral chakra is an area you want to work with. If your hip movement is kind of stiff, one way you can check this out is stand and do some hip circles. We're going to talk about this during the attunement practices part. But if you just start doing these hip circles and you find that it feels kind of, one of my teachers says crunchy, or like you're just not able to do the full movement, that's usually an indication that we've got some stuck and stagnant energy here in the sacral chakra. Other things would be when looking at our emotions. So if you feel that you are empty, that would be a sign that there's some issues with the sacral chakra. Or if you feel you're stuck or you're isolated, you're just kind of feeling emotionally very low and empty, that can be an indication of sacral chakra, need for sacral chakra work. Other indications would be with sexual dysfunction, shame around sex, difficulty connecting to a partner. This could be an issue of both the heart chakra and the sacral chakra, which are both pretty connected. If we find that we're putting up a lot of excessive walls or boundaries, this would be a sign of needing to work with the sacral chakra. Lack of passion or excitement in your life, if you can't think of something that you're excited about or that really fills you with joy, it's time to look at this. It's time to look at your life, right, and try to find something that fills you with joy, because we need that pleasure to make sure this energy center is working properly. Anybody who is having creative blockages also will want to work with the sacral chakra. So I know for myself as a musician, I go through periods of time where I'm very prolific in my writing, and then other periods of time where I can't write much at all. And those times when I can't write much at all, as long as I know that I'm not expending my creative energy somewhere else, if I just don't seem to have any creative energy, that's always a sign sacral chakra is a chakra to work with. And before I go in and talk about the excessive chakra, I just want to take a side trip here for a moment and say that when we're working with our energy, it's one of those things that is very long term. We're not going to come in and just kind of tune up the car like we took it to Jiffy Lube and got the oil change and now we're fine. The sacral chakra is all fine. Actually, in some ways, maybe it is like oil tune-up. You have to take the car in multiple times or the car is going to break down, right? So it needs to go in every so often, every so many miles or every so many months. So we kind of think about that and our chakra work. Every few months, I come back to the sacral chakra because I know it's one that I need to work with. And I know that most of the time I'm deficient in my sacral chakra. And so I come back every few months and it's like, work on it for that month or prioritize it for a week or two give it a tune-up, right? And then, but it's not just walk away and think it's done. It's come back and cycle through it the next time I need it, because I'm listening to my body and I can hear, like when my hips start to get tighter, I know it's time to work with this chakra. When my creative energy feels like it's dwindling, it's time to work with this chakra. If I feel like my emotions are getting kind of all over the place, it's time to work with this chakra. Okay, so let's then go back to what we were talking about. So that was all about being the deficient or the restrictive energy of the sacral chakra. Well, what about excess? Well, the excess is, instead of having a restriction of emotions, this is feeling too many emotions. So an overabundance of intense emotions that really don't feel great. This would be a sign that there's too much energy flowing through the sacral chakra. You may feel emotionally labile, where the emotions are kind of going from one extreme to another extreme. You might find an intense need to be connected, to be around people, can't be alone, is often a sign of excess energy in the sacral chakra. Trouble keeping boundaries, can't say no, that would be another sign. And oftentimes when addictions, if you're someone who has an addictive personality or has one or more addictions and you find those kind of getting louder, that's often a sign sacral chakra is involved and probably has some excess energy and needs some work. Now, it is normal for us to flow back and forth between the two different states of being restrictive and being excessive. So if we are someone who has sacral chakra issues, perhaps we've had some kind of abuse from early childhood or that overly controlling environment, and we know our sacral chakra is one of ours to work on in this life, you may find that you go back and forth between excessive and restrictive, and that's normal and that's natural. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to find the balance in the middle, like most things in life and magic. So when we're balanced, we're not afraid to experience the pleasurable things in life, but at the same time, we know when work has to be done, right? There's two sides of it, and we're able to balance between them. We are okay being alone, and we're okay being with others. So we find that balance there. We are able to nurture ourselves and we're able to nurture others, and we find that balance there, and it's not tipped to one side or the other. So one thing that I'm actually going to pause here for a moment because I saw that Melinda had she had a question, and it's pretty relevant to what we're talking about here. So she said, when a woman gets her tubes tied, does this harm the sacral chakra? If it does, is the harm permanent since the surgery is permanent? Okay, so great question. And as far as we talked about surgeries of the reproductive system will leave an imprint in the sacral chakra. So some of you know I've had a surgery for an ectopic pregnancy, and so immediately after that there was some sacral chakra work to do because there was going to be an imprint, some damage that, or I shouldn't even say damage, but a scar that was left there, just like the scar on your own body, right, on your physical body. So the energy, that doesn't leave permanent damage in the area. You just need to work more with the energy. So having had your tubes tied or having had some kind of a surgery to the reproductive system, it just means that this is a center for you to look at, to watch, to observe, see where your energy flow is. If it looks like it's pretty balanced, then you're in good shape there. But if you notice it moving out of balance, you want to pull it back into balance by doing some of the attunement practices for the sacral chakra. But it's not going to leave anything permanent, but it will leave an imprint. The same goes with abortions and things like that, miscarriages, ectopic pregnancies like I had. They're all going to leave an imprint there, and it just means that we want to put in a little bit of extra work. But nothing that's so detrimental. It's nothing as detrimental to that chakra. So another way that we can notice if we have issues of any chakra is to observe the physical body. I think this is to me, one of the most important aspects of it, is really observing what's going on with my body, where are my aches and my pains, how's my movement. So some manifestations, so basically what happens, let me just go on a side note here too. So when disease is coming into the body, whatever that means, whether it's an illness or it's some kind of restriction of movement, it generally enters our subtle bodies first. And so it will manifest as issues of the energetic body, so like the chakras. So you may start to notice that you're a little bit out of it, like your emotions are going a little haywire. you're finding a need to be either like around people a lot or want to not be around people at all. You might find that you can't go with the flow. Like these are all indications that there's something going on in the energetic body. And if we don't pay attention to that, that issue starts to manifest in the physical body. And by the time it manifests in the physical body, we do have a full-on issue with that energy center. And then because it's now in the physical body, we also have a physical issue, which means that we will probably, not probably, but we may need medical care as well as doing energetic work. So here are some signs that your sacral chakra issue has manifested into the physical body. So if we have disorders of the reproductive system, we probably have an issue in the energetic system as well. That correlates with that, which is the sacral chakra. So if we have issues of the spleen, the urinary system, like if you get a urinary tract infection, this would be a sign like you need to go to the doctor and get that fixed and get medication or whatever you need. But you also probably want to work with your sacral chakra, and you kind of do your work in both areas. If you have menstrual problems, if you're having trouble balancing hormones, you may want to go to a physical doctor or a naturopath to get help with that. But you also probably want to work with your sacral chakra and work in both areas. Issues with the low back, hip pain. If you notice that your hips are really tight, or like I said before, like standing and being able to rotate your hips. And if you notice it's very like sticky or it's hard to make those movements, probably we have some issues in the sacral chakra. Sexual dysfunction, lack of flexibility, deadened senses, loss of appetite, eating disorders. If you've had an eating disorder in the past and you notice the symptoms kind of amplifying, definitely this is going to be a sacral chakra issue. So I've mentioned this before. I had an eating disorder from a very young age, 12 or 13 it started, and during my life, I will notice that when that amplifies, I'll start to notice all of a sudden slipping into those bad patterns of what led me into those dark spaces. When I notice that going on, I know it's time to observe my sacral chakra and probably my root chakra too. So what do we do if we know there is something wrong with the sacral chakra? What should we do? So we're not doomed. There's plenty that we can do. So one thing we can do is work with color. Every single chakra has a color that's associated with it, and the color that's associated with the sacral chakra is orange. So you can bring more orange into your life in whatever way that means. Clothing, jewelry, candles, things on the wall, right? Tapestries, foods that you eat, flowers that you bring into your space. So bringing any of that in, crystals, things that are orange are going to help you connect to the energy of the sacral chakra. And sometimes for many people, just working with the color is enough to really come back into balance. So other things we can do though is movement or movement therapy, very good. So like I mentioned, the hip circles is one of the best things you can do. Just really get some flow into the lower half of the body. You can do it standing, you can do it sitting, and you can do other things. If you really have some issues with your body and you need some physical therapy, I would go get that, because that is actually going to help with your sacral chakra as well. If you're into yoga, goddess pose is very good for this, or pigeon pose. Anything that's going to open up your hips, any hip openers will be very good. So like low lunges, lizard pose. If you don't really know much about yoga, that's fine. You don't have to do the yoga. But what you can do that's very good is just lay down on the floor, and you can get out a mat if you want. If you don't have one, just lay down on the carpet or a rug. And you can do some pelvic tilts. And so what you do is you could put your hands on your hips to kind of help guide it. And you just sort of press your sacrum down into the mat or the floor. And your sacrum is that kind of bony area right like at the tip of your tailbone and above that. So very, very, very low back, that bony area above your hips. And you just kind of press that into the ground, and then you can tilt back and forth, tilt it, lift it up, and then push it down, lift it up, push it down. And it's a very, very subtle movement. If someone was looking at you, they might even not even know you were doing anything. But You're just kind of pushing the pelvis down and then lifting it up. It can be very, very, very good, shockingly good for this area because it's such a subtle movement. Other things we can do is squats. If you can't do squats, see if you could figure out a way to do them, even if you hold on to a chair or something to help you get down. Squats are so good for the sacral chakra. Hip circles, like I mentioned. Hydrotherapy, very good. Just a shower or a bath or something like that, getting in a spa or the hot tub. If you're fortunate enough to live by an ocean or a natural body of water, going swimming is so good for the sacral chakra. Another thing we can do is working with our emotions. So working to either release them or contain them as appropriate. So remember, there's sort of a spectrum of the way that these chakra energies work. So we could go from that very, very restricted side to that very excessive side. So on the excessive side, where emotions are bigger than they need to be, and on the restricted side, we're not feeling any emotions. So if we're not feeling anything, then we probably want to try to release something, right? We got to get some of that energy moving. And if we're feeling too much, we probably want to try to contain some of that. Another thing we can do is working with the inner child, because so many of our issues started when we were children. Working with inner child is golden for the sacral chakra, especially if you're somebody and you could trace it back to early sexual abuse or early kind of issues of control in the family. Trying to work through some of those, bringing that wounded inner child into the present, and sharing some of the pleasurable things with them, like especially things that maybe the inner child wasn't able to have when they were little. So maybe you didn't get ice cream when you wanted it or something like that. And sharing that with them now and bringing them into the things that give us joy in this life can do so much for healing that area. And then also shadow work is good for all chakras, but especially tied to the sacral chakra. Now we're going to talk more about that in a bit. But before I do that, I just wanted to list some correspondences, because we're all witches here, at least witchy friendly, right? And we love our correspondences. And I think something that's so unique about us as witches and our ability to work with these energetic centers is that we can create rituals around this. We can create altars and take it to that level. And so here are some correspondences for the sacral chakra. So we've talked about the color orange, so bringing in orange candles, orange stones, an orange altar cloth, anything that can create orange in your altar or your setting. The element here is water, so working with the energy of water. The tarot suit is cups. So sometimes we can connect to our chakras through tarot. So exploring the suit of cups and looking at it from the very beginning, the Ace of Cups, all the way to the King of Cups, and seeing how those energies play out in your own life. Working with planetary energies, both the moon and Venus are connected to the sacral chakra through that element of water. So you can bring in one or both of those planetary energies into your rituals. Your herbs to work with, and this is not an exhaustive list, but a few to choose would be orris root, Damiana. Damiana is a very good one. It's an aphrodisiac, a light aphrodisiac, and you can create teas with it and tinctures. Gardenia, such a nice one to smell, right, to breathe in. Jasmine. I really love clary sage for the sacral chakra as well, especially if you are having issues with hormonal balancing. Clary sage is so good for that. Some minerals and stones, anything orange. Carnelian is my personal favorite for the sacral chakra, but I also love orange calcite. And because of the connection to the lunar energy and the element of water, the moonstone is also connected to the sacral chakra. Now, deities are usually split into Hindu deities and all of their pantheons. This just has to do with the fact that the chakra system comes from India. So the Hindu deities connected to the sacral chakra are Sarasvati, Lakshmi, and Vishnu. Lakshmi is very good for water. She's connected to the element of water. Vishnu is her partner. So you have that kind of that union between the divine masculine and the divine feminine when you call them in. Sarasvati is very good for the throat chakra as well, but good for the sacral chakra because of the connection to creativity. And I will mention that there is a creative aspect in the throat as well as the sacral chakra. So these two are very much connected. If you feel you've got some issues with your sacral chakra, you might want to explore your throat as well to see if there's any issues there. Now, The deities from other pantheons are Yemaya. So any deities that are going to be connected to the ocean and water are going to be very connected to the sacral chakra, and any gods or goddesses connected to sexuality, sensuality, or pleasure, they're all going to be connected to the sacral chakra. So we got Yemaya, Venus and Aphrodite, Tiamat, Diana. Mari is a Basque goddess. We've actually worked with her in our Shadow Seekers membership. So she's a very interesting goddess to work with. Poseidon, Dionysius, Pan, Hathor, and her connection to pleasure. But this is not an exhaustive list. So if you are, you are somebody who works with deity, you can Google it. You'll find some other deities too that will be connected, or just find deities that are connected to water, and that they will work as well. So let's end by just talking a bit about shadow work and its connection to the sacral chakra and the shadow aspects of the sacral chakra, and then we will open it up for the Q&A. If anybody's got any questions, you could start putting them in the chat. It can be about the chakras or the sacral chakra, but it can be about anything as well. Any questions here? So shadow work and the sacral chakra. So psychologically, one task of the sacral chakra is to help us integrate the rejected parts of the self, which is the exact purpose of shadow work. So there's such a connection here between our shadow work and the sacral chakra. And when we work with these rejected parts of the self, when we begin to integrate them, what we find is that our self becomes indivisible and we become whole. And that's the goal here. Now, our shadow work is an important aspect of healing the sacral chakra. So if you know that the sacral chakra is an area that you're working on or need to work on, then you probably want to explore shadow work if you're not already doing that. Now, exploring certain themes in your life can give you guidance into areas where you can do your shadow work. So think about these themes and how they play out in your life. What is your connection to pleasure? Do you give yourself the opportunities to experience joy and pleasure? Or do you restrict yourself? So really think about what is your relationship to that. If you restrict yourself, do you then find yourself binging on pleasurable things at some point? And so these could be areas for you to just sort of look at yourself, reflect on yourself, and decide, is this an area where I need to do a little bit of work? Think about the theme of creativity in your life. Are you a creative person? Do you feel that you have issues with creativity? Sexuality and desire. What is your relationship to your sexuality, your sensuality? And that's an area to explore. Where do those issues come from? Do they come from past relationships if you have these issues? Do they come from childhood? So exploring back. So what will sometimes happen with our shadow work is that we'll just have this pattern that we go through, or this thing about us that maybe isn't necessarily contributing to our wellness, but it's just something about us, right? And we don't really know where it comes from. And when we do our shadow work, we begin to explore these themes, think about them, reflect on them. We notice that we might find ourselves going back to the past. And all of a sudden, we can connect this pattern that we are doing at 40 or 50 or 60 years old, or 30 years old, but as an adult. And we'll connect that all the way to when we were like 2 or 3 or 4 or 10, or something that happened to us back then. So just exploring the threads of these themes throughout our lives can give us a lot of insight. Another thing to think about is flexibility and flow, both in your physical body and in your emotional body, and just kind of in your everyday life. Are you able to go with the flow? If you're not, why? Kind of think about, where did that come from? What causes you to not be able to flow or go with the flow? Surrender. Are you able to just simply surrender to the universe? Are you able to just surrender to the day and what's going to happen? Or do you get kind of stuck and restricted? And if so, why? Where does that come from? So it's a lot of questions that won't have answers right away in the beginning, and that can often be frustrating about shadow work. But when we begin to ask the questions, the answers start to come more and more, sometimes through signs around us in the universe, through dreams, through just meeting certain people who have other points of view that we'd never thought about. And exploring your relationship to your emotions Are your emotions appropriate for situations? Are they not? Are you not feeling in situations where most people would feel something, or are you feeling more in a situation than the other people around you are feeling? And this doesn't necessarily mean anything good or bad, but just exploring those themes, seeing where they come from, where do they go back to. So, areas that we can heal, then, if you notice that you deny your emotions, that's definitely an area that we want to heal through our shadow work and the sacral chakra. If you are denying pleasure, that would be an area that we want to heal. If you have a sense of shame surrounding sex or surrounding being sensual, we would want to look at that. If you feel that you have poor boundaries, if you can't keep your boundaries or people just keep overstepping them all the time. So we would want to look at that, explore that through shadow work. Being taken advantage of by toxic people. So if you find that's just simply a theme that people, you're just always the one that people take advantage of, or it just seems to happen over and over again. Again, we want to look at those themes. We want to look at those patterns in our lives and see if we can trace them back to where they came from. Inability to go with the flow or rigid thinking. Where does that come from? Obsessive thinking. So if you have like some obsessive thoughts about a person or a people or a place or things, where do those come from? Where do they lead back to? So these will give us places to explore with our shadow work. So sometimes people will say, I don't know where to even begin. And so this is a place to begin. It's exploring these themes that are centered in these chakras. How do they play out in our own lives? This is a place for us to begin our work. Uncovering our linkages, those linkages back to childhood and past traumas, and gaining insight into where these issues came from. This gives us control. When we don't know where they're coming from, or we don't know why we can't go with the flow, or we don't know why we let those people overstep our boundaries, or just why everybody's always doing that, or we don't know why we don't feel creative, or we don't know why we can't take pleasure in something we feel like we should be taking pleasure in. This is where we've lost control. We don't have power there. But when we do our shadow work and we start to uncover that insight, dig into the unconscious, figure out what's there, we take back the power. And it doesn't mean that everything gets healed and is automatically better. But what it does mean is when you start to see those patterns playing out, you know where they come from, and you can choose whether or not to engage. And that's really the key to our shadow work, is taking back that control and that power. And letting go of those patterns, that don't serve you, and recovering those pieces of yourself. All right, so we are going to stop there, and let's open it up for the Q&A. So if you're here live and you have anything that you would like to ask, you can go ahead and drop it into the chat. I see that, let's see, there's a couple here I see, so I'm going to answer these now. And if you're here, you can put more in the chat. Melinda asked, do you have a daily practice that you do with chakras? I'm thinking about adding something like this to my morning sacred time. Would you have further suggestions about a daily practice? Yeah. So I feel that with a daily practice, I guess it kind of depends on, are you going to focus specifically on one chakra, or you just want to kind of do chakra balancing in general? I think as far as a daily practice goes, it's a good thing to kind of contemplate how much time do you have. Is it 10 minutes? Is it 15 minutes? Is it 30 minutes? I had a teacher who suggested like 90 minutes to a 2-hour daily morning practice, and it's just not realistic for everybody, right? So we want to make sure that we're, first of all, just realistic with the amount of time we have, because even 10 or 15 minutes is enough to do a lot of work. So I would recommend doing some breath work in a daily practice, and some movement work, and maybe some light meditation. And if you want to work on shadow work during it, you can always like lightly meditate on a prompt. And you can even Google, like if you want to work on sacral chakra, right? You can Google shadow work prompts for the sacral chakra, and there's stuff that will come up. And to pick a question and then just begin to meditate on that in your light meditative state. And like I would probably begin that with a little bit of breath work, a little bit of movement. So if I was working with the sacral chakra, what I might do is I might start with some movement of the hips. So I would maybe be in a seated position, and I'll do like stir the pot like this, and just start with some hip work. And then maybe at some point I would stand up and maybe I would do it like that. I like to do some kind of like twists back and forth like this to get some energy going. So getting the movement in, and then from there following up with some breath work. So for the sacral chakra, some really good breath work is anything that's like connected to the water element. So I like the healing square breath for that. That's a count of 4 in, and then you hold for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4, and then hold for a count of 4. And you could do that breath for a few minutes. Or another thing to do is to kind of bring yourself into that receptive space is you can just breathe in and out through the left nostril. And that will kind of bring you down more into that, like it activates the feminine energy channel, which is the channel that's more connected to flow and receptivity. And that will bring you more into that space. And then once that's kind of balancing that area, you might add in the seed sound. The seed sound for the sacral chakra is VUM. It's spelled VAM, but it's pronounced VUM. And you could bring that in and kind of intone that sound, and then go into your light meditative space and contemplate maybe a prompt about the sacral chakra, or contemplate if you've uncovered one of those issues or one of those patterns, maybe contemplate that. Where could that have come from? And now you're already in that receptive space, so you're more likely to get more insight. And all of that could take, 15 minutes, or you could stretch that out and make that 30 minutes if you want. If you do yoga, you can also extend that by doing some kind of a sacral chakra yoga practice, really getting into the hips, some squats, some low lunges. And you could burn some incense connected to the sacral chakra during that, or a nice orange candle. So there's a lot of ways we can connect. I've even called in the goddess Lakshmi right before my yoga practice and kind of dedicated my practice to her. So that's another way to connect. Okay, so I hope that helps. Lynn said, I definitely need to work on the sacral chakra. Ironically, I physically hurt the sacral part of my back last week, hurt it last year too. Yeah, so me too. I have a lot of issues with my sacrum. And whenever we go into those acute spaces where we actually hurt it, it's a sign that we probably actually ignored some stuff energetically around us for it to get to that spot. But it happens to me too. All of a sudden, I'll just realize either my hips are out. I went to the chiropractor and like my pelvis was totally misaligned. And so that is something that you can try if you've got like pelvic issues, or like sacral issues of your sacrum, or the SI, sacroiliac joint, the SI joint. Go to the chiropractor and they can put you back in alignment, but then you need to do some of the energetic practices as well. So like you, Lynn, like I cycle through having issues with my sacral chakra, it becoming more prominent. So I would say once your back is feeling like you're okay to do some movement or do some work, I would get in and start working with sacral chakra. And then you said, yeah, it happened to you too. The pelvis was tilted out of whack. Yeah, mine was like totally out. And I think I need to go back in it again. I have a medical masseuse that I used to see before COVID. She doesn't really do the work anymore since the pandemic. But when I would see her, she had this exercise she taught me that could get the pelvis back in alignment. And if I can find the video, there's a video on YouTube that she found, and she gave it to a bunch of her clients, and everybody got their pelvis back in alignment. If I can find the video, I'll post it in here, and go in and try it. It's like 10 minutes, and it's kind of weird. Like, it's just the girl is just laying in her living room, and she doesn't have any of the props. She doesn't have like a yoga strap or anything like that. And it's kind of cool that she doesn't have it, because she grabs a pair of pants and a towel, and she just grabs props from her home, and she's able to get her pelvis back in alignment in like 5 minutes. So I'll find that. I'll post that in here. Nicole's asked, how do you get rid of obsessive thinking? Yeah, so that can be a really challenging one. So our obsessive thinking is connected to our sacral chakra because of that kind of obsessive component of the chakra when it gets to that more excessive area. Obsessive thinking can also be connected to some of the higher chakras as well, or it can be also connected to a root that's a bit ungrounded. So one of the things that I recommend doing is when you notice yourself in those obsessive patterns, is really stop for a moment and look at what you're obsessing about. If it's a person, if it's a situation, if it's a thing, what is it that you're obsessing about? And one of the things I like to remind myself is just this idea of lack versus not lack. Like a lot of times, like our obsessive thinking is we're obsessing over things that we're fearful about, that we feel like we're out of control of. There's always like we're generally not obsessing over things when we're happy or it's good, right? We're usually obsessing over things when it's not good. And so whenever we bring in that energy of kind of not having something or being fearful or restricted, we what we do is we take away space for openness and good things and receiving things, right? And so I really like the story a lot that I heard from one of my yoga teachers. And she said there's this story in the Vedas. Well, it talks about in the Vedas many times. It talks about this, that the goddess Lakshmi, who's the goddess of pleasure and abundance and the good things in life, she has a counterpart called Alakshmi. And Alakshmi is like everything that's not that. Not pleasure, not good stuff, not openness, not receiving, whatever the opposite of that is, that's Alakshmi. And she said in the Vedas, they tell these stories about how people would go outside of villages and they would leave these offerings of like burnt stuff and like gross stuff to Lakshmi because that's what she likes, because she's not like the goddess Lakshmi who loves all the beautiful flowers and perfumes and things. And so they would leave her all this like these gross things. And the idea was to keep her away from their villages so their villages could be filled with abundance and the goddess Lakshmi. And so one of the things I remind myself when I find myself in that pattern of that obsessive thinking about something negative or something I'm fearful or worried about, I remind myself that Lakshmi is here. Because the Vedas say that they cannot both be in the same place. So when Lakshmi is there, Lakshmi is not. And when Lakshmi is there, Lakshmi is not. And so we don't have to work with the goddess Lakshmi. We don't have to work with deities at all to understand that that's energy, right? So when we're obsessing, we're restricting, we're kind of clutching, we're worrying, we don't have the open palm that's receiving, that's bringing in the good things. And so we're not able to enjoy what we have. And so if you could just pause for a moment and just remind yourself, Lakshmi is here. You could just say that, or just say lack is here, or fear is here, or worry is here, and just kind of imagine yourself like blowing that out, or pushing that away, or sweeping it away, or imagine chords to all those like negative thoughts or obsessive thoughts, and just imagine yourself cutting those chords. Whatever works for you, kind of to think about that in your mind, to visualize that, whatever works for you, let go of that. And another thing that you can also try is like whatever the obsessive thought is, like I'll never have enough money, or that person doesn't like me, or whatever the obsessive thought is. See if you can change it, stop, pause, change it just to the opposite. So I always will have enough money, or that person likes me, and it's so simple and it sounds so trite, but it really does have an effect if we do it. So sometimes we won't even do it because we think it's too easy to work, but it can have a lot of effect. So what I would do is I would work with your sacral chakra, work with your root chakra, get yourself grounded and able to like be open and able to flow. You may find that helps release some of the obsessive thoughts, but if it doesn't, try a couple of those techniques and see if it works. I hope that helps. Anybody else have any questions, comments about anything? So next week, I'll just tell you what's coming up, and that'll give people time if there's any last minute questions. So next week, I am going to do an episode on shadow work because we'll be coming very close to the dark moon. Our dark moon is next Friday, the 13th. What a cool, awesome day for a dark moon, right? And so I'll be giving you some ideas on how to celebrate the dark moon, how to do some shadow work as we approach that dark moon. And then after that, we'll probably get back and do an episode on the solar plexus. And then I think I want to also do some episodes on the elements as well, since they're so connected to the chakras. So, oh, and I see Nicole said here she might do a cord cutting ritual. Yeah, I would do a cord cutting ritual with the obsessive thoughts. You absolutely can do that, and it can be pretty effective. June says she's got lots of work needed here, chronic unmanaged back pain, 4 surgeries in the abdominal area. Yeah, so that's going to bring in sacral chakra issues and solar plexus chakra issues, which we'll be talking about the solar plexus in 2 weeks. So, yeah, so I think anybody who's had a lot of those surgeries and has all that chronic back pain, you definitely want to explore your sacral chakra, find something that to treat yourself to, do some inner child work, get the color orange, um, do some movement. I can't stress that enough because it's like, just go back to that analogy of the tree. If something can't bend, it breaks. That's why here in California, after a certain period of time, the houses had to be built a certain way so they could move and they weren't just so stuck when the earthquakes came, because those are the houses that would get destroyed, were the ones that couldn't move a little bit. So even my old house was 2 stories before we moved here. And when the earthquakes would come, even when big trucks would drive down the street, you would feel the building kind of move. And it's a little freaky at first, but it's so that it doesn't break if the earthquake came. So we can think about that the same with us. Ask yourself, if you've got some sacral chakra issues, how much movement are you getting in? And when we have a lot of chronic pain, oftentimes the answer is not much. And maybe we're not even allowed to do much movement. But if that's the case for you, find out from your doctor what kind of movement can you do and do that. So when I had my ectopic pregnancy, they would not let me do yoga for 6 weeks. It was devastating to me as somebody who does it every day. But I asked them what I could do, and they would let me walk. And so I walked and I walked and I walked. And that's awesome for the sacral chakra. Very great for your creativity and your creative mind. And so yeah, so anybody who's got a lot of that chronic unmanaged back pain, definitely want to be working with this chakra. All right, well, if there's no more questions, I'm going to sign off, but feel free to put more in the chat, and I will go back later on afterwards, and I'll answer anything I didn't get to. All right, so until next time, take care and blessed be.